It is now a world in which, to these agencies, a family is worth more financially in conflict than in harmony.
Whoa. Oh my gosh. This is what I've said since the beginning. It's all about the money. It's all about the money.
Were of my mother telling me that my father didn't love me.
I felt closest to my mom when we were talking crap about my dad.
If I rejected my dad, I felt like I was getting my mom's approval.
I questioned, do I really know this person? Are they actually who my alienators said they were?
I had this overwhelming sense of having to protect my mom.
In her mind, she truly believes everything she's saying, that my dad was a terrible person all the time.
And I did start asking questions, and I did want to fact check.
Hi, and welcome back to the Anti-Alienation Project. I'm Maddie, and here on my project, I talk about all things related to parental alienation. I was alienated from my dad for 20 years. I figured everything out last year, and since then, I've been speaking out about this form of abuse and rebuilding my relationship with my dad. In today's video, I'm going to do a blind reaction to a video that someone sent me. Now, this video is about the Florida family court system, and it's a man named Chris Felder who testified before the Florida House Committee about his experience with how the family law system treats real people. He's actually the head of the NPO, which, if you don't know, it's the National Parents Organization for the state of Florida. So let's get into it.
Thank you for this opportunity to speak about how the family law system has treated me and my perspective on fatherlessness. 7 years ago, I was married to who I thought was my best friend. We had two beautiful daughters, 5 and 7, and a lifestyle I was quite proud to provide for. One day when I returned home from work, I found that my house was empty of furniture and clothes. My family was gone, my dog was gone, our bank accounts were emptied of tens of thousands of dollars. My wife had run away without any warning or explanation. And like Kevin McAllister's experience in the movie Home Alone, my family simply disappeared.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so if you watch any of my videos, you will see that this is a common pattern. I just interviewed Professor Ben Hine, and he said the same thing happened to him. When he was a kid, his dad got home, everything was gone. He was gone, his mom was gone, all their stuff was gone. It's really eerie how the patterns are all so similar.
She hasn't spoken to me since, but after years of fighting in court and through state agencies, I now have my children every other week, and while everything may look okay now, it did not come easy. Despite having taken all of our money, I learned that my wife was using a legal aid service funded by public and private grants to zealously represent her while attempting to steal away my entire life.
It sounds like he was definitely silver bulleted. Silver bullet divorce is something that my mom did to my dad, which is basically trying to destroy your ex without justification. This can involve bogus restraining orders, setting up a situation of domestic violence to get them charged, false accusations, a big part of this. I think Chris Felder has been through the ringer.
And made multiple attempts to restrain me from my own children and my home. There was no domestic violence. My point is that services paid for with our tax dollars were weaponized against me, and in my story, this was only the beginning. Also worth mentioning, talk about how legislation is actually applied. The legislation that one thinks would protect people from false allegations of domestic violence, the supposed third-degree felony, it's completely unenforceable.
Yep, this is the main problem I see with all of these cases, is that you can make an accusation in family court and you don't need evidence. It's taken seriously. I really feel for him, and I know it's not just his story. A lot of people, even watching this video, have probably similar stories.
Leaving the targeted parent to defend himself from the indefensible, blindsided, without similar legal support from public grants, and immediately assumed to be guilty before proven innocent. Today, I'm an advocate. I've experienced firsthand how unwilling the family law system is to demonstrate flexibility, schedule timely hearings, enforce orders, return phone calls, or otherwise share communication to share agency policies, and to seek clarity or correct misunderstandings. With impunity, I have seen judges, court administrators, agencies of the executive branch, and local governments misinterpret, ignore, or misapply laws, practices, parenting plans, and definitions for terms as simple as registering parent.
I love how articulate he is. He is really crushing it. What he's talking about is at the crux of the family court problem. You can make an accusation and you're not innocent until proven guilty in family court. You're not.
I've witnessed it. Otherwise qualified members of the civil service shy away from answering questions about my children with, It's inappropriate for me to answer your questions about your child, and you should hire an attorney. I have found myself being dismissed by these same civil servants when I attempt to explain the difference between legal information and legal advice, and why we're all entitled to legal information without the need for a lawyer. I can only guess how many actors in the family law system are willfully ignorant and refuse to consider or discuss reason, and as a result, how many children and their families are negatively affected.
Thank you. Thank you, Chris, for saying that, because nobody really considers the children, but they claim that it's in the best interest of the children. This happens so often. Women are actually trained by divorce attorneys, for example, to set their ex up in order to get charges made so that they can get more custody and they can get the full child support. And I wish this was rare, but it's not. It's common. When your parent is falsely accused and say they go to jail, or they're even charged with a crime or convicted of a crime, or even if they get off of the crime, the fact that they were charged, it can solidify the alienation in the child, which happened for me, happens to millions of kids everywhere. If you believe that your parent did this terrible thing that your other pathological parent is claiming they did, that's going to solidify in your head that your parent is a bad person. And nobody thinks about that when they're claiming the best interest of the child.
Regretfully, my story is a common one. Florida's family law system is a dumpster fire. There are federal and state-funded programs that intend to help children and families that have the effect of ripping families apart. The overarching problem is lack of oversight, followed by apathy, learned helplessness, and incompetence.
This is important. He says the main problems are lack of oversight, apathy, learned helplessness, and incompetence. Apathy is a big one, I think. Guardian ad litem's judges, from what I can tell, they get so used to these cases and hearing all these horrific details. They're able to separate it from reality almost, and it is their job, so I understand that. But for the people involved, the people whose lives are being determined by the court, guardian ad litem, the judge, it can happen in a matter of minutes. You lose your kids.
I have seen firsthand, and I have heard many times over, our laws are not being followed or applied evenly.
They're not. One of them is custodial interference. Custodial interference is a crime, I believe, in almost every state. Custodial interference, if you're not aware, is when the other parent does not bring the child to you or claims the child refuses to come with you on your custody time. And this is actually not a civil matter in the state of Florida, particularly, because we're talking about Florida here. It's a criminal matter. You know, police, when you call them, they don't enforce it, but they're supposed to.
Private state-funded agencies, or the judiciary, or state agencies, or even school boards. The organizations are unmonitored, and the laws that govern them are not enforced, or even unenforceable. For split families, it is well understood that when laws are not followed correctly by local courts, state agencies, and school boards, it has the effect of separating parents from their children and their money. This problem is so large and so very unchecked because citizens have no ability to enforce their rights, complain to an officer, petition a court, seek a writ of mandamus, or insist on accommodations protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act. I'm confident many of the failures I see in the system are consequences of unfunded mandates from federal programs and the criteria that states need to meet in order to receive federal funding. These requirements get all the states' attention to perform those services that are linked to federal accountability, but then do not necessarily pay attention to providing the services that are not linked to the federal audits, despite legislation. What's more is, while the imbalance of services fails Florida's families, these agencies do not receive any performance audits by the state itself to identify to the legislature the inadequacy and ineffectiveness of the programs, no less the requirement to comply with the law. My crusade is not partisan. The system has been failing for so long that it's created an underwhelming sense of indifference among those thousands employed by it.
He's right on the money here. It's a shocker to me that family court reform has never been a large talking point in any election, especially not a presidential election. And here we have coming up a presidential election next year. What would make me so happy, and I'm sure what would make so many people happy, is if family court reform was one of those main talking points. I don't think there's been any major change to family court since maybe the 80s. Things have changed a lot since then.
It doesn't self-govern, and because it doesn't pretend to, it has been overrun by bad actors. It is now a world in which, to these agencies, a family is worth more financially in conflict than in harmony. Much
Whoa. Oh my gosh. He's so articulate. A family is worth more in conflict than in harmony. This is what I've said since the beginning. It's all about the money. It's all about the money. People get divorced. What do they argue about? They argue about, maybe their assets, maybe alimony. But mostly what they're in and out of court for years is all about the kids. It's custody, it's child support, and a lot of that is parental alienation, a good percent. So if parental alienation were identified and treated swiftly and effectively, imagine the loss of profit for all of these bad actors involved. There is a concerned effort to not have people learn that they have been through parental alienation. There's a concerned effort to get rid of the term, deny the term by organizations, parental alienation experts, individuals, groups of people. For example, the United Nations, the World Health Organization, SHARA. I think it's all about the money. In fact, I know it's all about the money. He's right. Broken families are going to pay more than the families who live in harmony. So what does that tell you about the best interest of the child that they claim to have? They don't give a crap one way or the other about the child. They care about the money. They're fine with having you in court for ages. Actually, that's good. They would like that because that would give them more money. Disgusting.
a whale is worth more dead than alive. And as long as it has the appearance that the family law system goes unchecked, families will continue to be destroyed with the same insensitivity as when corporations kill whales, destroy trees, mine the earth, and pull oil out of the ground, even though we know it's destroying lives, the country, and the planet, and we know that it's going to leave a worse world for future generations.
That's exactly it. That's exactly it. I would like to go to the lawyer who advised my mom to get a threat of violence restraining order against my dad. There was no threat of violence. And then that lawyer also advised her to set up what looked like a domestic violence situation, call the police, have a charge made so that she could get majority custody and a lot of child support. I would like to go to his office and I would like to talk to him and say, after you advise your clients to destroy their partner, you go home and do you ever consider the kids? Because pulling up with my grandma in the car to my parents' house, seeing 6 or so cop cars and hearing the version of events from my mom and my grandma later that night about how my dad was abusive to her and having a restraining order, not being able to see him. That was the final thing that solidified in my mind. I was not going to have a relationship with my dad. I believed he was bad, abusive, and didn't love me. That's what solidified it. For 20 years, I could have had a healthy, loving relationship with my dad. And do you realize the role that you played? But I looked him up and he's dead, so I can't do that. I want to. And if you're a child of divorce listening to this video, please contact me. Please contact me. It should not be our burden to speak up about this and demand change in family court. Unfortunately, it might be up to us to demand change and try to help the next generation of kids going to be affected by this. Also, if you've been through anything like this, leave in the comments what happened to you. Leave your story in the comments.
Thank you so much for your time. I welcome any opportunity to continue this conversation.
Short but sweet. This guy's amazing.
In his experience, will help lead us to be able to clarify some of these policies, some of these laws that conflict with each other, so that then it can become a little bit more streamlined and a little bit more clearer as to what are the expectations. We know that relationships and marriages these days, they're just, they have challenges.
And that's to put it lightly.
And sometimes the result, it winds up in divorce. And when there's children involved, again, it's a nonpartisan issue when it comes to children. And I wish that we as legislators, and this is a comment sidebar, would take the politics and the political comments away from the work that we have here. And so I just want to thank you for coming and sharing your story and having the courage to speak with us, as this is your house as well. And it's important that we hear from our constituents that have these challenges, because at the end of the day, we are tasked with making some really arduous decisions and meaningful legislation that affect our children. And it's not their fault. They're here. So that's why.
Yeah, that's a good point. He's really courageous for doing this. I mean, a lot of people, I can only imagine if I were in this situation, I'd feel ashamed, I'd feel embarrassed, I would just want to hide. He didn't. He's been speaking out. He's now, like I said, the director of the NPO in Florida. Kudos.
Thank you very much for coming and sharing your truth and your story, and hopefully it'll help us lead into, again, aligning these pieces of legislation together, break down these silos, and get down to a really good.
I will say, though, I don't really think it's about different pieces of legislation. I think that family court needs to be overhauled. I see it doing a lot more harm than good. I have a lot of ideas about that, but yeah, I just don't think that changing a few pieces of legislation is going to do the job.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your testimony. I know that a test often becomes a testimony, and I have to apologize because a lot of times in this committee and others, when we talk about fatherless children, I think of fathers who are incarcerated or fathers that walk away. That is the case, I'm sure.
There are more fathers out there than you would like to believe that want relationships with their kids but have been prevented and stonewalled from having relationships with their kids by their ex and by the court system. That's horrific.
But I've not really thought about the fathers that are left behind. So it shed a different light on that subject to me today. My question to you is, it's a broad subject. Sounds like there's a lot that needs to be tackled. What would, in your opinion, if you had to take one bite out of the apple, what would be the first bite?
I wish it were a smaller bite, but in speaking to the Auditor General's General Counsel and my research of Section 11.45 of the Florida statutes, what we need to do is introduce legislation that requires the Auditor General to conduct what they called a program-level performance audit that incorporates all the existing public programs, activities, and functions when there is a family dispute or a child lives with less than both biological parents, when both biological parents are living.
I don't know how you could argue against that. I don't even know how that's possible that that's not already being done. Any argument against that is just showing your cards that you do not care.
So you're ready for that question, I think. Any way you could send that to us?
Yes.
Thank you.
Very good, quick, concise answer. I have a question. How long ago did this happen, and how old are your children now?
7 years ago, there are 11 and 13 today.
Okay. And when did you get the opportunity to be with your children? How long did that take?
Initially weeks. And that was long after the sheriff's deputy and DCF had determined that there wasn't any reason why the children should not be with me. It was a matter of the courts, and that documents had to be filed, and the hearings had to be scheduled, and the system does not move quickly.
And alienators do. They move quick as the speed of light. I remember the restraining order against my dad. It was weeks. It wasn't months. It wasn't years. It was weeks, and that was enough. That was enough time.
Did that happen, did you say?
It was weeks before I saw them. It was close to a year and a half before anything was documented.
Horrific. Imagine losing your kids for a year and a half without any reason. You didn't do anything wrong. You didn't do anything to deserve that, and yet you lose your kids. And to be honest with you, out of all the stories I've heard, the fact that he got his children back after a year and a half is like one of the best case scenarios I've heard personally. Sometimes, like right now, I just ask myself, like, how is this allowed to happen? How is this allowed to happen?
Oh, yes, Representative Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just want to state, we hear his story, but this happens every day. And once the kids are caught in the system, they usually spend 4 to 5 years in the system. no fault of their own. Parents get involved, parents get upset, one say this and the other one said that, and the children are the one that's caught in the middle. And when we as legislators sit here and make these decisions on glass houses and don't understand a one-parent household, we don't understand a low-income household, and we make those decisions, we are hurting the families. And because you are poor or low income does not make you not be a good parent. Perfect example. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Oh, I like her. I like her a lot. She knows what she's talking about.
And I want to address the idea that just because it's in legislation, I'll use as an example, I showed up to school one day to visit my children for lunch, and I was turned away. And I asked why I was turned away, and they said, you don't have any access to your children. You have no rights to your children.
As a parent myself, I'm just imagining showing up at my daughter's school for lunch and being told I don't have access to my children without having done anything to justify that. No wonder so many targeted parents are suicidal. It should shock no one.
I brought my court order, and the school said sorry. The mom is the registering parent. There's nothing in the court order that says that she's a registering parent. There's nothing in state law that defines a registering parent. There's nothing in school board policy, Sarasota County. Nothing in school board policy that defines a registering parent. The school board, and my understanding, my research is that 66 of the 67 county school boards have made a decision that whomever fills out the paperwork is deemed the registering parent, which has the effect of giving one parent, they're effectively a court. They're giving one parent rights and they're taking rights from another parent. It took multiple trips to a judge privately to ask, would you please sign this one-page order that says that my rights have not been taken away, because otherwise the school will not give me any access. Mom had crossed me off the list at school. Had no access to teachers.
Just by the way, this is exactly what my mom did. This is not just him. This is not just his story. This is across the board, common as hell. And yeah, that's what my mom did, like the day after the restraining order and the domestic violence charge. She brought me in the middle of the school year to a brand new school in the 3rd grade, brand new school, and walked me in there and told the principal and my teacher that there's a restraining order against my dad. And if he shows up, you need to call the police. And I spoke about this in my Silver Bullet divorce video, but all day long I remember I was looking out the windows looking for the cop cars, scared as heck. I was really scared. I believe that my dad would have he could have been taken to jail if he had showed up that day. So this is a common technique they use. They'll use the jurisdiction of schools to further cut off the parent.
No access to school records, no access to report cards, simply because she was miffed at me and crossed me off the list. And there was no mechanism. That's again, I could talk about this for a long time. I tried to keep this 5 minutes, but there are no mechanisms in place to enforce these things, and they have the effect of separating parents from their children.
So the video ends by saying, family law is a dumpster fire and family services are failing families. Instead of helping families, family law and family services separate parents from their children. There you have it. So when are we getting rid of family court? When are we doing this big family court reform that is in desperate need of happening? Let's do it. Let's do it this presidential election. If you have any ideas about a solution for family court, about an idea for overhaul, or anyone that you think I should contact or interview, please leave it in the comments. If you like this video or like what I'm doing here, please give the video a thumbs up. It'll boost it in the algorithm and get more people to see what parental alienation is. If you like what I'm doing here, please subscribe to my channel, share the video, or become a member to my channel. We do live Q&As the first Sunday night of every month. You can ask me anything, talk about anything related to parental alienation for members only. Stay tuned for a lot of exciting things coming up. And thank you so much for your support. It really means a lot. I'll see you in the next one. Bye.